Tonight we are talking about 7 levels of web performance journey. It's an interesting talk. I mean, I don't always talk at the meetup as I organize, I promise. But tonight I am one of the speakers. So, yeah. So first, introductions.
To start?
Eric, yeah,
right.
you start. You're on the
Sure.
left.
All right, cool. Yeah, hey everybody, I'm Eric. I'm a principal engineer at Babbel. Known Sergey for quite a while. We both, I don't know, I've been a performance nerd since, I don't know, as long as I can remember. So it's a pleasure to be here in front of you looking forward to doing this presentation, and hopefully I'll learn as much from you guys as I'll be teaching you all.
I'm Sergey. As I said, I'm organizer of this meetup, but I'm also a web performance engineer here at Cloudflare. So that's what I do too.
Hello, I'm Alex, or Alexander. I'm a web developer, but I'm also an artist, animator, and designer. I helped put together this specific presentation here, so I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. So we all made the presentation, but Eric and I am going to be presenting. Alex is going to be manning the camera tonight. So let's start.
Yep. All right, so I guess we'll get up to speed. Pardon the cheesy pun. So I guess the entire, like from a high level overview, the intent of this presentation is to try to kind of highlight the making the you probably work in a company where you wish that performance was more important to the people that were in charge of the company, and you're an engineer. It matters a lot to you. It probably matters a lot to your coworkers, and on the business side, they probably say that it matters a lot to them, but it's hard to get like traction with them, and so like. There's a reason. The business side has a good reason for thinking the way that they do, and you have a good reason for thinking the way that you do. So how do we bridge the gap? So like, that's what we're going to be starting with here, and then we're going to be going through the 7 levels of like how do you achieve that? At least in our opinion. So for starters, we're going to kind of imagine splitting the organization into 2. So we have the engineering side and we have the business side. On the engineering side, going to be focusing on speed. So like engineers tend to evaluate quality. By I guess measuring like the elapsed time of important functions, but unfortunately those don't always the business side doesn't always see eye to eye with how important those measurements are. So I guess Sergey, why don't you go into like how the business might view that?
And the business usually cares about the business, the dollars, right? Like that's where how they pay us for what we do, right? That's like, as Eric said, like we are very engineering driven. Even if you are new to it, like you have engineering mind, right? Like, and business folks don't have that mind. They have their own mind, a very different mind, and they again care about money a lot. Like we all care, right? Like, but they know how to make them. And if we talk about other sides of non-engineering sides, like designers, for example, they care about user experience quite a bit, right? Not many of us engineers are attuned to that, right? Like, and we don't necessarily speak the same language either. And product managers, they care about functionality of the website, right? Like also user experience, not necessarily the same way as designers, but again, oftentimes we interact with those people, but those are the people that don't speak our language, as to speak. Is that a pun? Probably, So that is a challenge that we've seen both in our past, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of how this came about.
That's right. So yeah, that's actually like how the conversation to even do this presentation was to begin with. Was we were kind of commiserating over what that was like, and it's like, why don't we come up with a solution for it? So like basically, if we take the 2 ideas, we have a engineering side that kind of sees things one way. We have a business side that sees things their own way, and then kind of we create a mutual understanding between the 2, and by via like essentially like a common currency for literally a currency, and for the fact that like the common currency is literally dollars between the two because that's something that everybody understands. Everybody has to pay rent. Everybody has to, has to pay their bills. So like dollars is something that everybody understands like intuitively. If you can correlate performance metrics to dollars somehow, then when you are kind of creating your performance metrics, like when you communicate those metrics to the business side, if you could communicate those changes in dollars, that would be a lot more effective than saying like, hey, we made the site 300 milliseconds faster. Like that probably sounds good to the business, but they don't really know what to do with that because like also on the business side, like you not only have to convince them, but they also have to substantiate it to their boss. And so if they have to go to their boss and then they have to explain it with a business mind, like why does 300 milliseconds matter? They're going to be like, well, I don't really know what to say. So like if you can go to them with dollars and say like this project is going to make $50,000, that's real easy for them to substantiate because like that's a unit of measurement that they use every day. Whereas like milliseconds is something that's kind of like a little foreign to them. So I guess at this point you might be wondering, I guess what matters to my business. So ultimately, if you think about the question, if you think about conversion rate of your customers, like does conversion rate across all customers, is it the same? I mean, hopefully that's kind of a rhetorical question. It's going to be different for varying reasons. People have different levels of income. They have different motivations. They have, they're accessing it with different devices, different speeds of access, and ultimately there's different effects on conversion rate can be performance, presentation quality, SEO availability, et cetera. And if we take a look at roughly this revenue forecast with these three kind of sub-metrics in it, the sub-metric that correlates to performance the most directly is conversion rate. So like we're going to be using conversion rate for the next couple of slides to explain why, like how performance is important from a business perspective and vice versa. And so I guess why don't we do that and kind of go to the next slide. Yeah. And thanks. And so you might be wondering, you might be wondering like, if we think about it from performance, if you think about it from the standpoint of your own website, is my site fast or slow? So taking it from a very simple point, we're on level 2, we're going to be making it all the way to level 7. We're going to be getting quite a bit more complicated. So starting from a simple point, is your site fast or slow? We use just conversion rate, and we have 2 example like anonymous websites. One website has a conversion rate of 10%, and one website has a conversion rate of 5%. Which of these 2 websites is faster? Somebody want to just yell out the answer? That's a great way to put it. So like, yeah, oh, that's a good point also. So like, yeah, so essentially you're improving the performance, like you're lowering the friction between a user's intended action and them actually being able to complete it. So they're like, I want to click this button so that I can get to the next page. And like, if they don't have to sit there and wait as long so they can do the next action, it's like, because ultimately, like if you're on a website, like I just want to buy some eggs. Like they just want to buy the eggs and go on and do the next thing. Like they don't want to be on the website. Like the point of buying the eggs is not to use the website, it's to buy the eggs and do something else. So performance just gets you there faster. So ultimately, like if that was an example. So if we want to like look at examples like in the real world, like what correlating business metrics with revenue, like we have 3 examples here. And just to be clear, like if you guys want to download these slides, and like we have specific links to 2 of these are WPO stats, like Sergey mentioned earlier on. One is LinkedIn. If you want to dive deeper into the details of these, but these we chose 3 retailers. There's plenty of examples of like really big retailers. Like there's lots of examples about like Amazon and Walmart. And we chose against that because most people don't work for a retailer that's that big. Like we wanted to choose some like retailers that were like a little bit more, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like just we wanted to choose something a little bit more like attainable for the average person. Like, what's a more typical business size, like closer to the average. And so, like, I guess our first example is Aldo, which is an online shoe retailer. They found that fast rendering brought over 4 times more revenue than slow rendering for mobile users and almost 7 times more for desktop. And just to illuminate that a little bit more, so what they mean by fast rendering is they actually broke their user base down into 3 different groups. And so there was a group that could render the UI from between 40 and 60 frames per second, between 20 and 40 frames per second, and between 0 and 20 frames per second. And so, like, essentially what this improvement is moving from the slow group, which is 0 to 20 frames per second, up to the fast group, which is 40 to 60 frames per second. And that's the 4x and 7x jump you're seeing here. And so
amazing number, 4x.
4x and 7x is like pretty amazing. It was actually a little bit more than that if you look at the real numbers, but like we rounded down. So Ray-Ban, Oakley, and Sunglass Hut, those are probably the most well-known brands on the slide here. You guys have probably heard of this. Online sunglass retailers. They saw this one's actually pretty interesting. Saw a direct inverse relationship between largest contentful paint and cost per click via Google Ads. And anybody unfamiliar, so what largest contentful paint is basically how long it takes to render like the largest piece of content on your page. So whether that be the largest image, the largest piece of text, maybe it's a video. The really interesting part about this is as LCP improves, ads got cheaper, or as LCP got worse, ads got more expensive, which is something I never intended to see, but like this is like a pretty big driver for a lot of businesses, like the cost of ads. So if you could go to your business and say, hey, like I can make our ads cheaper, and they're going to be like, what are you talking about? It's like if we make our you know, they even came up with a formula, which I tried to reach out to them to get more information on like how to actually decode what these means. I didn't get as far with that as I had hoped, but so basically like delta CPC is a delta cost per click equals K times delta LCP plus Q, and the description of what K and Q are in the parentheses here. And if you want to see more details, it's in this LinkedIn link. But this is a great example of where you can go to your business and really like talk to them directly about something they spend money on every day. To say like performance can directly impact the bottom line. And so there's Google constantly has bots scanning, like the same bots that scan your site to figure out where your search ranking is the same bots that will figure out how fast your site is. Like because those bots also use performance to rank your site in search. So those same indicators are used to charge you for.
So their search engine optimization also probably improved, so they were probably ranking higher in the results.
Yeah.
With the traffic performance as well as the added price. Like that. It was like a double win.
Sure, that's a great point. Yeah.
And there is another win. Probably fewer users dropped between clicking and getting to the site, right?
Yep.
Probably even bigger win than all that.
All great points. And so the last point is Swappy, which is a refurbished phone retailer. They improved load time by 23%, LCP by 55%, CLS, content layout shift, by 91%, first input delay by 90%, which resulted in a 42% increase in mobile revenue, which is a lot, and a 10 percentage point increase in relative mobile conversion rate. So what does that last term mean? Relative mobile conversion rate just means there was a 10 percentage point conversion rate on mobile devices is 10 percentage points higher than on desktop. So now that we have some examples from what is the correlation between performance and revenue on other websites, let's start digging into how do we get to start doing the same thing for your website. So how fast, you might be wondering, how fast is my site in kind of a more general sense. So we're going to start from like real basic. We're just going to start with a single metric, and we're not even going to pick what that metric is yet. We're going to get to that. Mm-hmm. So this is just a generic metric, the time it takes to do one important thing. In this case, it's just 3.4 seconds. So if we just measure once, you might be wondering, I did this one thing, like, is it fast, is it slow? I don't know. So you're gonna have to start to measure it repeatedly to know, like, how does this compare, or like, where does this fall? Is it good? Is it needs improvement? Is it poor? And so once you start measuring it over time, you're going to start being able to set thresholds or kind of like group these results into where these results belong. And ultimately, like, if you want to take this kind of grouping to its natural conclusion, that's where you get to what Sergey's going to be talking about.
Yeah. So important, and many of us start with that, right? Like, we measure a number, right? We grab a tool, probably point it at our website, get a number, right? Like 3.4 seconds. But what does that number actually represent, right? Is that my tool's speed? Is it like this one user who got that speed, right? Reality is that there are many users. You don't have one user, right? Like, if we had one user, we probably like know them, you know. But the reality is we have many users, and that number probably represents somebody in that population of the users, right? Is that this one, that one? Is it an average one, right? Like, that's a question that you want to ask yourself after you start measuring. I remember, I mean, I think it still happens to many organizations, but I remember clearly when it started to happen, when people started asking the question, what does the number represent, right? Like, where does that lie? We started by measuring, and then we geeks loved our number, and like, oh, nice, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever the number you had, right? And we're like, does it matter? And the reality is that you have many different users, right? Some of them have better experience, like those happy ones on the left, right? And some of them are not that happy. Right. Eric mentioned the thresholds, right? And LCP before, right? Like Core Web Vitals, if you heard about it, it's a program that Google established. And a couple important things they did, they set those thresholds. They said what the numbers should be. They said what should be red, yellow, or green, right? And good, needs improvement, and poor. But also, they defined where this number lies. Which of the numbers are we measuring, right? And in web performance space, after Core Web Vitals came out, I would say, and started to become popular, I think we narrowed down to measuring so-called P75. Who is familiar with the term percentile? Okay, some of you, good. Maybe in America you study that in high school, but like in Russia we didn't. Right? It took a while until I understood that. But effectively, what it means is that out of our whole population of our users, we order them by the metric we have, in this case, speed of their experience, and we take fastest 75%, so 3/4 of the user base, the fastest, and we measure the slowest of them, right? And that is the number that we go for. And it's done for various reasons, like you want to exclude complete outliers on this side, but also you don't want to talk about the average user, because average, or P50, and we're not going to talk about the difference between mean and median, right? Like, that's for statistics class. Like, please go check it out. But P50 means half of them are faster and half of them are slower. It's like you're measuring someone in the middle. So we kind of chose P75, and when in web performance world you talk about a number, you should default to P75. But more importantly, I urge you to never just say the number. When you say 5 seconds, always say 5 seconds at P75. 5 seconds at P50, whatever the percentile you measured, always mention the percentile, because otherwise it will be like, oh, I measured some user somewhere once, right? Like, does it matter? Probably not, right? So as we are progressing through these levels, as Eric said, like from not knowing that performance matters, only knowing your business numbers, to starting to know that faster is probably better, to starting to measure, right? And now you start measuring all of your users and calculating the percentiles. We thought a lot about how to name a talk, and we thought maybe this is a maturity model. Maybe it's levels of maturity of your organization, because that's kind of how we came about with these levels, right? Like we remembered all that history, how we went with our organizations or people we helped and so on. So what do you do with that percentile? Now you have a percentile, right? What do you do? Well, the most obvious thing that many people do is track it over time, because one rule, universal, if you don't care, if you don't pay attention to web performance, it gets worse, right? So you should definitely track it over time, right? And I see that many organizations kind of do this, right? Like this is kind of the first thing, especially if organization starts has a lot of operations, and your performance engineers came from your operations side of the world, right? You will see this tracking over time. However, we just talked about huge population, right? Why are we talking just about one number? Like tracking one number is not very useful. It just tracks one, right? So oftentimes you will see that we track several percentiles over time, right? P50, the usual person's average, right? Or at least close to what they think, if they do. P99, which is operations person's percentile, which means like we are almost at 100, but not really, you know. And P75 that we usually talk about, right? So tracking these three over time is where I see a lot of organizations somewhat stop. So please don't stop, right? That's one call. There is another problem here, is that I feel that converting, I just described what percentile means, right? Like with all those pictures, emojis, and all of that. But even with that in mind, it's always very hard to mentally go from 3 lines to your population of your users, right? Like it's very hard for these charts to really reflect that reality of life, right? Like that those are real people, right? Those are, each one of them had experience. There are many of them. In fact, how many of, like when I said percentile, how many of you thought of normal distribution? Like, and what you studied, probably like the bell curve, right? Like that's the thing, right? Well, reality is performance metrics are not bell curve. So visualizing how this number represents your population is even harder. I can tell you that. And reality is that this distribution is usually, for most of the metrics that we measure, is so-called log normal, right? And thinking of all of your people as grouping them by the measurement, right? Like the bottom axis is the time, the speed axis, right? Or speed metric rather, right? Putting them on a chart with how many of them were in which bucket, right? And then seeing where those percentiles land is great tool. It helps you in many ways. First, you stop looking at 3 charts, right? It's like you go from, oh, computer measured it, to, oh, I know this person, and they were angry. Oh, I know this person, they were not so angry. And happy users were amazing, right? Like we had a party with them, they loved it, right? What I'm saying is, like, remember we talked about designers, product people, and even business people, maybe less so. They understand this, right? Like they are about user experience. So connecting these two worlds, that's why I kind of insisted we draw this as a emoji histogram. I don't know if it's the first emoji histogram out there, but like I think like this is a very powerful tool. So every time you think of a number, if you see the number on some dashboards and whatever, remember this picture in your mind, right? Like this will help you hopefully understand your population of your users, kind of what they're experienced and all of that. Again, picture will not do it. It has to be your brain, but this is hope. And we are at level 6 already, right? So this is pretty far into the game, right? Like understanding your distribution, tracking your full distribution. It's worth saying that in order to do that, you actually need to measure, right? Like a lot of your users, right? Like you need to have enough statistics to get the distribution, right? Like one measurement will not do it, right? So we are not talking too much about it. About the measurement. We have many meetup talks about that, so check those out. Okay, so once you have the distribution, what is that level 7 where today companies, what do people do with those distributions, right? Like when they understand all of that data from their tooling, they measure usually with real user measurement, or RUM. If you're not familiar with that abbreviation, please check it out. Or talk to us. We definitely talk quite a bit about it here. So the first thing, most obvious one, you compare. Let's say before and after, right? Like you fix something, you compare it to two populations, right? Which parts have it moved? We kind of think like, oh, one number moved, it means everything moved. No, that's not how it works, right? Some optimizations work on like long tail of your distribution. Some optimizations work only on the left, right? And I don't have as many hairs anymore because of pulling out them for understanding this kind of stuff. So comparing two distributions is a great way. Like oftentimes you would have maybe A/B testing framework, right? Where who is familiar with concept of A/B testing? Okay, nice. So you send two experiences to two groups of users, you measure them, and supposedly very scientifically and all of that, and you have good numbers, and they tell you that one group had higher conversion rate than another. And then you compare them also this way, right? Like so, highly recommended. Not easy to do, but
With the caveat that A/B testing usually makes everything slower.
every tool you use can impact your actual measurement, right? Like I forgot which principle that is, but it's a very scientific principle, right? Like, and A/B testing tools were not really well made with performance in mind, so have that as a caveat. Doing a good A/B test is not easy. Talking about what was it? No, YouTube effect is a different story. Anyway, to compare distributions, like overlaying histograms is useful, but there are some challenges. Like, for example, one of the challenges is that if your populations are different, if you only send better experience to 10% of your users, obviously one will have more data points by definition. So overlaying them is kind of hard, right? So check out this cumulative distribution function. It's a way to chart the same data that histogram shows, right? But kind of in a line like this, right? Where you go from 0th percentile to 100th percentile, and you kind of see how that transition goes, right? It's not as easy to remember those people with their emoji faces, right? When you look at this chart, histograms are much better at that, but this one is easier to compare in particular. So when you overlay two lines, it's very easy. Like when blue line is below the yellow line, it means the blue one was in green. Like you did better. When it's the opposite, it means it was slower. And the area between those is how much impact you made, right? Usually they're not like. Usually your chart will not look like you had like half of it was improved here and half of. Oftentimes it will be like, oh, you moved the whole thing, or you moved these percentiles up, right? Like this is illustration, not real statistic. But for comparing populations, this is useful, and also it's calibrated as well. So like effectively, you can compare different sizes of your populations. Another thing that is a new type of plot that I learned about recently is called QQ plot, which is specifically made to compare distributions, right? And diagonal red line is your axis from 0th percentile to 100th percentile. It's kind of similar in concept as the previous one, but it's a little harder to read. But once you get practiced, maybe it will be helpful. So all the points above the red line are where this distribution was faster. And all the points below the red line is where that vertical distribution was faster. So you plot both distributions, basically, right? And that's how you chart. It's a little harder to read, Again, coming back to the very visual emoji people, right? Like that's why I love histograms quite a bit, because it kind of gives you that transition between engineering talk and human talk, right? Did I say human? Yeah, that's what I meant. But last but not least at all is actually correlating it to dollars. That's kind of how we started this talk, right? Like correlated to dollars. This chart is it's the first chart of this kind that I know of by Cliff Crocker. By the way, he works at SpeedCurve, runs their real user monitoring, right? But it's a chart that shows conversion rate based on the bucket, right? So you have multiple buckets of users, like having those speed experiences, right? Like our histogram we were just looking at, and different conversions. You notice anything, right? That high number on the left, right? It's like moving, very simple, moving some of those emojis from here to there helps quite a bit, right? Like those are literal dollars that will be helpful, right? They will pay more. That's basically the answer. And this chart, literally this very chart, made me understand this a few years ago when I kind of went into this space and kind of understood the value of real user monitoring, right? So let me know if you need a link for this. We might be linking actually that already, so I forgot if we did. Correlate money to speed. So now we went through all the journey of what people do today, right? And we thought, what else can you do, right? And I think we need to show you the next as well.
The fun part, yeah.
Yeah. And all of this is imaginary, right? Like none of this actually done today, but maybe somebody will, you know. So for example, 3 dimensions, right? Like we talked about time and histograms. Why not draw that? Like I can imagine this is your histogram over time, and maybe the color is what another dimension that shows you outliers or changes in the recent, like maybe some of these visualizations can help you maybe not look at specific value in specific point, but to see trends better, to see time, right? And kind of connect those two communities of operations folks who love their time series charts and web performance folks who love their distributions to understand the current state, right? So maybe that's the way to go. Again, this is an artistic rendering from Google. And this is another chart that I am really excited about trying to do, which is called violin chart, which I learned again about recently. And what it does, it shows multiple distributions side by side. And I'm really hoping to maybe plot various metrics. As Eric said, like we're not picking the metric tonight, right? Like it's just too much to talk about both the math and the metrics and the business, right? But there are many metrics that you will be working with. We are not. I think you already mentioned 5 3-letter abbreviations at least, or something like that. At least 4,
4 or 5, yeah.
You know, and that's only the tip of the iceberg, you know. But web performance people love their 3-letter abbreviations. Sometimes 4. Although 4-letter ones are kind of not so good. It was a joke. So my idea is that maybe if we can plot some of these metrics side by side, it might also give you insight into what you have, right? Like kind of gives you another dimension of comparing multiple metrics at the same time. So check it out. Maybe you will be the one. And I don't know what happens on this right side. Maybe people just leave. Maybe that's what it is about. I guess at 24 seconds. Oh no, that's actually hours. This is from another study. This is not web performance numbers, by the way. These are all from charts that nobody used yet, right? Like we will, right? You all will go home and build all of them.
So this is the part that
build.
This is a little bit of a Steve Jobs moment, like one more thing. So everything we've been talking about up until now, it's like this has all been theoretical. So like, wouldn't it be nice if there was like a real tool where we could like what if there was a real tool that like actually stepped you through these 7 steps, and like you could actually use and actually enter in the numbers that your business actually uses day to day and output revenue. Like, wouldn't that be cool? Well, I think that's what we're actually going to go and build, like after this presentation, and probably even some of those next step ones, some of those 3D distributions, some of those things that haven't been done yet. So we're super excited about doing this, and so I guess we affectionately refer to it as like right now UX speed calculator. I don't know if that's what we're going to continue.
Yeah,
to call
this
it,
is an existing tool that I built a while ago that only does a few of these, and that's kind of was the motivation for Eric to reach out and for us to chat about like, can this be taken further?
Yeah. So we're gonna hopefully build on top of this, and then like do a totally different. Well, this is like it's like a single screen tool, and like what we're looking to do is like step the user through and like
the journey we talked
through
about.
the same journey that we had the same exact journey that we had in the presentation. So you could like literally give this to your boss and say like somebody who doesn't know anything about performance, like step them through from the beginning and get them through to the end, and then they can hopefully understand it's like why does performance matter, and in like 10 minutes, hopefully they'll understand more than they did at the end, and then maybe the next time you talk to them about performance, they'll actually think about approving the project that you want to work on. Like that's kind of like that's the thing that excites us, because like we've been trying to get performance projects approved for, I don't know, I've been trying to do it for 20 years now. I don't know how long you've been trying to do it for. Sometimes we're successful, sometimes we're not, and like we just want to help you all do the same thing. So.
And it's a community project, open source. So like, go check it out. Join us. This is awesome. Some of this is intimidating, but that's why we devised the step guide, right? Like that you can identify again maturity. Yep. Where do you stand today? Maybe don't think about all the steps. Think of the next step, right? Look at feel where your business is at and meet them there, right? Like kind of help with this journey. So. Reach out to us, Eric, myself, and Alex, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
So that tool seems really interesting. I guess I'm wondering how the data is added to it. Is it like API based, and you're using like web APIs for performance to put into like some kind of server that collects it to visualize, or?
Well, this specific tool is a model. It's not actual data that you get. In fact, it was built because I didn't have access to actual measurement and tried to convince the business I was at that time to invest into the tooling, right? We talked about a bunch of tools, synthetic, RAM, right? Maybe we didn't go that deep, but sometimes it's an expensive endeavor, right? And that was my effort. Like I spent a weekend for the first version, maybe another week for the final one, right? Trying to model distribution to show people like, hey, if you move the revenue, or if you move the amount of users, revenue increases, but if you speed it up, revenue increases as well, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Okay, thanks.
You could build more on top of it if you like. In fact, I think Source to Impulse, which is, doesn't matter what the tool is. They have had a prediction model like that based on your own data, for example, right? And some providers can build that into their tooling as well. It gets a little more caveats and gotchas when you go from a model to reality, But
first of all, thank you very much. This is very impressive in terms of the ideas. Wanted to add a little bit of a edge that sometimes when we present these diagrams, right, we have to also target for would the audience be able to, like the target audience be able to read those diagrams, right? So like, a lot of it makes sense to us. We can learn, like we can try to understand. But when we target them, like some of these charts would work better than the others. So we also have to kind of plan how what's the best one for them of them. One chart that was very similar to Wiley, and that's more common to people to see on a day-to-day basis if they're into stock trading, is a candle chart. So that's another way to show your histograms on a time basis, like progression throughout the weeks, the months, whichever way you want to present it. Just throwing an idea there.
Yeah. We definitely didn't talk about all the charts. The one notable one is what Google uses, right? Like with those thresholds defined, right? Instead of doing histograms, what they do is they break your population into those groups, which of those three buckets you fit in: good, needs improvement, poor, right? And some of those charts over time are also quite known in the web performance community. There are quite a few tools that use that. I mean, Google's what is called webmaster tools. I forgot what they call it these days, but basically their own tool to help you visualize it uses that, right? And so again, depending on where your audience stands today, you cannot show them level 7 charts if they are on level 2, right? Like you need to go next step and slowly but surely
Exactly.
Get there.
Yeah, that was the whole motivation behind the step-based approach. If somebody, and also we could potentially add like a skip option in there. If somebody is advanced and they're on step 1, they can just jump to step 7. Like if they're a stock trader, most of these steps are probably irrelevant because they probably looked at so many charts already that they're used to this type of thing. But I would argue most people are probably not too familiar.
In your charts, you're assuming people have good bandwidth. I often find myself in a situation at a coffee shop or something where I don't have good bandwidth.
Yeah. No, we actually don't assume that. We didn't discuss specific reasons why some of those people have red face and some have a smiley face, right? There are many reasons, right? And these charts will not necessarily answer the question of why exactly, right? Like they're trying to build a business case, and that's why you probably want a set of tools that gets you from the journey from having these numbers to then trying to dig deep to understand why is that, right? Like why is this specific user? Why is my shape like that, right? Like sometimes it's simple answer and sometimes it's very hard. And that's why what we do at Meet for Speed meetups, by the way, we kind of help you get there, right?
That's right.
So oftentimes the natural distribution is because users have different phones, different networks, different devices. They are on subway. New Yorkers here know. Well, dial up, maybe not anymore, but I mean, those users might exist, but
Yeah, Subway is a pretty unique situation across the country because I don't know, you're going stop to stop, and you go from having 50 megabits of bandwidth down to practically zero, and then back again, and just constantly again and again. I run into that every day, and whereas most people are in their living room with a cable modem, so
not most, and that's a mistake that we all make. We generalize because you need to look at your numbers and see if that's true.
okay,
You don't know that.
See, I'm learning
because oftentimes I found that we all have misconceptions, either because we think people are like us or because we think people are not like us, right? Or like we have maybe we point at two types of groups of people, and that's it. Reality is much more complicated. I mean, obviously, if you have only a website that deals with very particular type of people, then maybe you can narrow it down. Reality is it varies dramatically. Again, we probably don't have time to talk about that, and there are quite a lot of talks, including on Now conference. If you're interested, Alex Russell did quite a bit of active talk, let's call it that way, about how devices vary quite a bit.
Yes.
And like us having this equipment in our hands has nothing to do with reality. Nothing to do with reality. Cable modems, dial-ups, depending on where you are, who is your audience, vary quite a bit. So don't assume. Use a tool to measure. Right.
Yeah, Alex Russell's at least in my opinion, the most fascinating graph he releases. So he releases a new article every year. I forget what it's called, but he basically he reassesses the performance landscape at the end of every year, and then there's always a graph in his articles. One is a multi-core graph that says how fast is the device if you use all the cores of the CPU, and one of them is how fast is it if you use just a single core. The single core is the one I'm most interested in because that's basically the bottleneck for every website. And you look at how that performance landscape looks compared between a low-end phone and an iPhone, and the difference is massive. So if you're using an iPhone to test your website at work, you're doing your customers a huge disservice because the average user hitting your website is having a much worse experience than that.
By the way, you might know Alex Russell's name if you are into JavaScript. Usually, JavaScript community hates Alex Russell because he speaks the truth about that Eric was just talking about. Because your front-end framework, single-page application framework, is probably the reason why all of this is trouble.
He's a big fan of React. In other words, he kind of hates it for pretty good reason.
So obviously there are a lot of tools for measuring kind of the speed that your page first loads and is interactive for the user. But how do you deal with it when there are a dozen other metrics? Like the speed of adding something to my cart could be very different from the speed of loading this particular page or doing some other bringing up a support chat, something like that. How do you select which of those to focus on?
I would argue law of diminishing returns. I mean, how you first want to look at basically take Sergey's advice and measure your user base and see how, especially against Core Web Vitals, where do most of your users lie. And if you take a look at your Core Web Vitals and most people are in the poor range, you should probably be looking at performance and improving that. But once you're down into like a reasonable range, then I don't know, probably like a good mix. Have a couple of performance metrics that you want to focus on, and then a couple of I don't know what you want to call those, UX metrics or whatever, and kind of like establish a good mix between the two of those. Because obviously, if you're too lopsided in one way, then you're kind of blinding yourself to part of what your users are actually doing. Did I cover what you're?
I think also there is a gotcha as we drew the 7-level path. I don't know why we love the number 7 so much, but I like a number. The challenge is that depending on who you talk to, they might be on a different level, right? And they might not be ready to go where you want to go. So we couldn't really fit any of that advice directly into here. But I can answer some of that from my experience. First of all, you need the right metrics, right? That's one of the challenges, right? You mentioned a few very particular metrics for what your business probably operates with, right? Like you're familiar with. So you need to understand what are those metrics. Like Google's 3-metric Core Web Vitals will not be answered for every business. It's a good way to start, right? Like on the earlier stages, right? But it will not be your reality once you sold, as Eric said, all of the red in there is taken care of, right? Once you do have metrics that somewhat represent your experience, then what you probably want to do is to understand which of those experiences actually makes you more money. Right? Like diminishing returns is not only in effort, but also in like it's not even not even distribution in many dimensions, including speed, but also your experience. I think conversion impact score, I think, also came out of Paul's team, where they tried to assign different routes on your website or different parts of the experience to different impact value, right? And depending on your business, you will have different setup, but I think general notion is that browse experience is very speed sensitive, but makes less money, obviously, right? Like because they browse, while checkout experience is immediately where we want to be very on top of it, but it's not as speed sensitive, right? So again, this is answers that I heard in the past, but that's not universal answer. Use the tool, measure, segment. I think that's the key here. Like with that distribution we talked about, don't only measure the speed, but also segment by your populations where they had this experience, and the shape of that distribution will be different for different experience. Checkout page, it looks very differently than homepage of the website, or product page if you are in e commerce space. Yes, exactly. Very important task. Yep. That was a specific measure. Like we contemplated which metric to pick, and we're like, we cannot do that. Yes, it's a very important task. Exactly.
Yeah, this is more of a comment than a question, but I imagine it's really important to focus on the core product, because I've definitely used apps where the checkout or the conversion part of the app is clearly much faster than the rest of the app, and it feels a little skeevy to say, I'll take your money very quickly, but the rest of the app is quite slow. So I imagine focusing on whatever the core user experience is probably pretty crucial.
By the way, you're lucky. Most of the time it's the opposite. Usually checkout is abysmal.
I was gonna say we have the opposite problem. Yeah.
Checkout. I want to say that my next, after I quit being an organizer of this meetup, right, in 4 years, that's the timeline I put myself. So come join. I want to become a speed designer. I will design the speed. I will look at that. I will hey, what does your user feels about it, right? It's not about graphics only, right? It's where do you want it fast? Where can you make it fast, right? Probably everywhere, right? What's realistic? What to pick, right?
Like feng shui?
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah.
Maybe that. Yeah. In a speed way.
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? Anyone? Okay. Thank you very much.